Good afternoon. My name is Robin Kincaid, and I want to welcome you to our Nevada PEP webinar. Thanks for joining us. Today, our topic is special education in a pandemic. These are advocacy tips necessary during challenging times. I wish I could tell you that we didn't need to have this webinar, but unfortunately, we've all been through a very stressful and difficult year, and we really want to bring you some information that helps parents and advocates out there to be able to advocate during this pandemic period and to understand that there are no waivers, IDEA is not in quarantine, and that we're all trying to move back to maybe a different normal, but that the rights and protections that are offered under IDEA are still intact and available for parents to use as they determine it's necessary. So I'm going to start with talking a little bit about Nevada PEP. We are celebrating 25 years of excellence, and we're excited to be able to support families in the entire state of Nevada. So Nevada PEP, the acronym, the PEP, stands for Parents Empowering Parents, Parents Educating Parents, and Parents Encouraging Parents. I'm a parent of a young adult that has a disability. She has a particular syndrome and has had lots of medical needs, and she struggles with her attention to stay focused and be able to continue her college studies. But she's done extremely well in her ability to be able to walk and also to be able to communicate. So we're excited at her progress and continue to teach her something new every day. Nevada PEP is very focused in on bullying prevention, and so we have I Care, We Care, Together We Can Stop Bullying campaign, which we offer a lot of resources and information for families who may find that their child has been bullied. Reminder that we have these free archived webinars on our website, and that families can watch them at any time and anywhere that they have access online. We also have some sponsorship opportunities, and we are promoting our Hand in Hand Together We Can, which is an appreciation program. As advocates, we often get focused in on what items need to be fixed, but we also want to talk about some of the wonderful things that are happening in our Nevada communities for children with disabilities. And these stories that families bring to us give us an opportunity to give a lapel pin and a certificate to the recipient. So please consider writing a story today. Visit our website at nvpep.org, and you'll be able to make that submittal, and we'll get right going on getting that certificate and pin out to the individual that you're honoring. We do love volunteers and are continuing to work with our volunteers even during this pandemic period, and we hope to continue to grow our volunteer program once we're able to be back in the Sparks-Reno office and the Las Vegas office as well. A little bit about myself. I've been with Nevada PEP for over 21 years and been helping families to navigate what can be a very challenging system. And so I have really found this last year to be one of the most challenging for advocates and for parents. And so we want to be here on a long-term basis to continue to help families and give them the support they need. As a reminder, all of our services are at no charge, and we don't have any kind of a waiting list. So if families need help, we encourage them to call to send an email, which is our pepinfo@nvpep.org, or to give our office a call, or to visit our website to get more information. Now we're going to move into our special education in a pandemic presentation today. So let me pause this for just a moment, please. Right back with those slides. Here we go. Well, hopefully you're seeing the slide come up now where it says special education in a pandemic. So this was written based off a paper that Nevada PEP developed to try to focus families on some of the things and maybe some misinformation they were hearing, and to help them understand, more what's not changed, and to remind families about the individualized nature of services. So we're going to continue to go back to that individualized word as we walk through some of this information. First, we're going to start with talking about free, appropriate public education. So in November of 2020, the Nevada Department of Ed was putting out some guidance, and some of the things out of that guidance remind us that it was recognized that the laws were not designed necessarily in the past to address a national health emergency, particularly one of this duration. I mean, I think when the pandemic started, we all may have thought this was a couple of weeks kind of issue, and certainly it's turned into a much more lengthy issue. It is important to recognize that the mandates of the IDEA and the Nevada Revised Statutes and the Nevada Administrative Code, Chapter 388, must drive all decision-making with regard to the provision of free, appropriate public education to each student with a disability during these unprecedented times. The determination of FAPE to be provided may be different in this time, of a national emergency. FAPE may be provided consistent with the need to protect health and safety of students with disabilities and the individuals providing special education and related services to students. As a reminder, in 2017, the Supreme Court rendered a decision on Andrew F. versus Douglas County School District. This case involved a little boy named Drew with autism who made almost no progress on his IEP goals. His parents said he was entitled to more under the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So the Supreme Court ruled on this that to meet its substantive obligation under IDEA, a school must offer an IEP that is reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in the light of the child's circumstances. The court additionally emphasized the requirement that every child should have the chance to meet challenging objectives. This decision clarified the scope of IDEA's FAPE requirement, and that still stands today. So that nothing's changed in that, and it's important that families are aware of this ruling and the obligation of the school district to provide the services that are necessary for children to make progress. So the pandemic has not removed the school's responsibility to provide FAPE. Another reminder that came out of the Nevada Department of Ed November 10th memo, which to let you know that it is one of the handouts that's in this webinar today. On the pane, you will see the handouts, and there are two groups of handouts. We encourage you to download those. One of them is this memo and guidance that came out in November. But as public agencies and officials grapple with the challenging decisions, administrators, educators, and parents may need to consider multiple options for delivering instruction, including special education and related services to students with disabilities. You know, these options could include like remote distance instruction, but in-person attendance, or a combination of both remote distance instruction and in-person attendance, which is also referred to as the hybrid model. However, OSEP reminds the school districts and the state that no matter what primary instructional delivery approach is chosen, the state and the school districts and the IEP teams remain responsible for ensuring that a free, appropriate public education is provided to all children with disabilities. If the state and the local schools require schools to limit or not provide in-person instruction due to health and safety concerns, then we have to remind everyone that the IEP teams are not relieved of their obligation to provide FAPE to each child with a disability under IDEA. So what are these requirements to follow the IDEA timelines? Again, referencing back to the November 10th memo, the reevaluation of each student with a disability must be conducted if the school district determines that the needs of the student for educational or related services, including without limitation, improved academic achievement or functional performance, warrant a reevaluation. Or if the parent or teacher of the student requests a reevaluation. Reevaluation must occur not more than once a year unless the parent and the authorized representative of the school district otherwise agree, and at least once every 3 years, again, unless the parent and the school district agree that the reevaluation is not necessary. And there's a lot of concern by families about doing reevaluation if we're not going to be able to utilize the typical practice. In other words, many times families are going to want in-person reevaluations, that they're not going to find that the collection of data and information is going to be very good in an online setting, or where parents are just filling out forms or screenings. And so it is important that families think about the timing on reevaluations, and certainly they may need some of this information if there's going to be a further discussion about compensatory, but they also may find that they want to defer the timing out 6 months or whatever, so that they are still able to get good information, but that the actual evaluation process doesn't feel too compromised. So initial IEP and timelines, you know, an IEP must be in effect in the beginning of each school year and before the initiation of special education or related services. In addition, a meeting to develop an IEP for a student must be conducted within 30 days of the determination that the student needs special education and related services. And as soon as possible following the development of an IEP, the special education and related services must be made available in accordance with the child's IEP. School districts are encouraged to use creative means to gather evaluation information, assessment kits, using, for example, the evaluation information that has been worked on and developed and established by the early intervention professionals is another way to be able to look at whether or not this student meets the eligibility criteria. Other opportunities would be virtual and then in-person meetings where arrangements are made for a student who is brought to the school, and of course all the social distancing and masking is in place to be able to help that student be able to receive an in-person evaluation and to be able to get that process started. If the annual IEP is past due, The school staff need to reconvene the IEP after obtaining the present levels. This is a real critical piece. We want current present levels. Asking the parent to make changes without an IEP meeting cannot occur in instances when the annual IEP needs to occur. So we can't be trying to hold or make changes if there has not been an annual IEP meeting. Just want to stop for just a second. Our question pane is open, and I want to make sure that you are aware that you can put in questions or comments. We look forward to that. Don't forget to download those handouts. We are just so excited to have so many of you be part of this webinar today. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to have such a group. So we hope this information is going to be helpful. So we'd like to talk about how students need to make meaningful progress. The Office of Special Education and the Office for Civil Rights and the Nevada Department of Ed, all of them encourage parents, educators, and administrators to collaborate creatively to continue to meet the needs of students with disabilities. We know this is a challenging time for parents. We also know it's a challenging time for schools, but we do need to work creatively. I may be considering practices such as distance instruction, teletherapy, teleintervention, meetings held on digital platforms, online options for data tracking, and documentation. In addition, there are low-tech strategies that can provide for an exchange of curriculum-based resources, instructional packets, projects, and written assignments. This could be pretty difficult for working families that are working during the day. They're really going to struggle. And so it is important that we find options, whether a student is able to be able to look at a recorded lesson, get instruction that way, and then certainly paper and pencil packets are another option. Families that are working, that they're going to need flexibility in accessing services for their children. If the online systems such as like Infinite Campus and Canvas are not communicating with each other, parents may want to call a meeting with the principal, discussion on alternate ways of submitting grades and making sure that students are not experiencing failure as a result of complicated reporting systems. So prior written notice is one of the items that is listed in your procedural safeguards that families receive from the school district, and it's important to have a good understanding of prior written notice. But the families must receive prior written notice, including, of course, the details of any upcoming meeting. So it has to contain clear and specific description of the action that the school proposes or refuses, like what has been added, changed, or removed from the IEP or evaluation. For an evaluation, the action proposed should include the specific evaluation procedures and evaluators. So for example, it would be a list of specific tests and then like who is going to conduct those tests. It also needs to contain the reason why the school district is making the proposal or refusing the request. Also needs to have a description of the evaluations, assessments, records, or reports that the district used to make their decision. Description of what other options were considered by the IEP or evaluation team and why they were rejected. Descriptions of other factors that could have affected the proposal or refusal. A statement informing the parents of the protections they have under IDEA's procedural safeguards and how they can get a copy of Nevada's procedural safeguards. And of course, resources for parents in help and understanding prior written notice and procedural safeguards overall. Let's talk about making changes to the IEP. In making changes to a student's IEP after an annual IEP meeting for a school year, the parent and the authorized representative of the school district may agree not to convene the IEP meeting for the purposes of making such changes, but instead could develop a written document to amend or modify the IEP, or portions of the IEP may be revised without redrafting the entire IEP. In Nevada, the agreement to make these changes or amend a student's IEP without an IEP must be in writing. So it's important to be familiar with the required members of the IEP team. In most instances, the parent, special education teacher, regular education teacher, and a school district representative, also known as the LEA, a person that supervises special education, are these required members. Revisions to the special education and related services for a student, must be in the IEP. If the school staff should contact the family to ask to make changes without an IEP meeting, families again will first have to agree in writing to make these changes without a meeting. Parents may want to let the staff person know that they want to meet with the IEP team, that we know that, many of the best practice out there is to have the information and the input of these IEP team members, also to have current present levels, and also, of course, to have the prior written notice. Families have the right to disagree with changes if they don't feel the change meets their child's needs. Another area that has come up during the pandemic is privacy concerns. So we like to address, some of these problematic areas. And so it is important for both parents and students to receive training on the platform, so they are aware of how to turn off the camera, how to be able to mute and unmute. In the IEP meetings, parents could discuss how can families access class session recordings and how long are they available if the student needs a review. So for example, one of the things that we've seen in a lot of distance learning, or even in the hybrid kinds of delivery, is that there is minimal instruction, heavy on assignments. And often we find students get very overwhelmed with the amount of work they're being assigned. In some instances, we've seen situations for kindergartners and first graders that are getting 50 assignments a week, and they're just like, there's no way they'll get all those done. They're just too little, and they don't have the experience that a kindergartner or first grader would have in order to become this accomplished student. So if the student struggles with keeping the camera on, certainly can visit the idea of an accommodation, and it can be discussed to allow to keep the camera off. So if the camera itself is causing anxiety or stress, or the child is very anxious, we need to have that conversation. We also have to understand what kinds of monitoring need to be done in order to ensure that the privacy is there and that the family is not being subjected to additional IEP that establishes the specifically designed instruction, other services and supports that are individually designed to provide educational benefit to a student with a disability. So alternative planning documents such as distance learning plans cannot replace IEPs. Revisions to the special education and related services for a student must be in the IEP. So some of the steps that would be taken before we make a reading, what their reading level is, the grade text that they are using. Also that prior written notice is provided to the parents so that the parents understand what the proposed changes could possibly be. And then, of course, after a revision, the parent receives a copy of that revised IEP. So in instances where the learning plan has different services, including a variation in minutes than the IEP, there could be some discussion later as part of that conversation about compensatory at a later IEP meeting. So these are some reminders of what IEP teams should ensure in the IEP process. To a large extent, the contents of an IEP defines what free appropriate public education looks like for that particular student. This makes the decisions of an IEP team extremely important and legally binding. The IEP team decisions are expected to be based on data and the input of every member of the team. Present levels, data is collected to determine and document where the student is currently in academic and functional levels, including behavior. Specially designed instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of an eligible child, the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction in order to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability. Related services must be provided to assist the students in advancing appropriately toward attaining the annual goals and to be involved in and make progress in the general curriculum. The type of setting the child's IEP is carried out is called placement. Parents have a right to be part of a group that decides a child's placement. Placement decisions cannot be delayed or deferred due to the pandemic. And as a reminder, placement is different than location. The goals are designed to meet the child's needs that result from the child's disability to enable the child to be involved in and make progress in the general curriculum and to meet each of the child's other educational needs that result from the child's disability. IEP teams must make an individualized determination of whether and to what extent compensatory services may be needed and when they will be provided. Parents can document missed or very poor services from the spring semester and the fall semester, and they can talk with the IEP team about the need for compensatory services. So as we continue to go into the spring semester here and document what services were provided, any concerns will help the IEP team discuss further compensatory needs. Reminder again that we have those handouts. We encourage you to download them. We also have the question pane open and certainly are happy to take questions. So parents may want to ask how the school is going to provide access to the general curriculum for the school year and how they will make up missed curriculum for the spring 2020 semester. Because we know that when the pandemic basically broke out in March of 2020, a lot of the services were delivered almost in a crisis teaching mode. It was difficult for school districts to pivot and adapt and provide these services. And so what kinds of missed curriculum did students experience? If they were in the 4th grade and they didn't get the whole last quarter or part of that semester of that curriculum, what should occur so that they have the opportunity to make sure they don't have gaps in their understanding of what 4th graders are supposed to learn. Supplementary aids and services could include accommodations that help the student with the pace of instruction, such as the recorded sessions, retaking tests, and extended time to complete assignments. The IEP team discussions for extended school year may include the child's emerging skill the level of attainment and regression. For transition age students, IEP teams will want to discuss the course of study and credits to ensure that there is a pathway to graduation. As a reminder, transition age is 14 and older. The team's also going to need to develop a coordinated set of activities to prepare students for post-secondary education and independent living. Schools are required to provide a summary of performance for students that are graduating or have reached the age of 22 and are leaving school, which can be helpful to share with adult agencies and colleges. We don't want to forget those special factors. There's 7 special factors in Nevada, which is behavior, limited English proficiency, if the child is blind or visually impaired, if the child is deaf or hard of hearing, assistive technology, and communication needs. It is important that those questions be really walked through and that there is some thoughtfulness that occurs and how some strategies are going to be implemented even during this difficult time where services look so different. Also, families that might have been in a situation where services were dramatically changed and the specially designed instruction time was reduced significantly, we want to look at that reinstatement of items taken off an IEP, and or if there was variation between the IEP and some kind of learning plan, then we want to make sure that those services get reinstated. Students also might require counseling if they're struggling with distance learning or even the transition back to school. And as students might move toward a hybrid kind of learning environment, they may need to just go part-time during the day. It may be too much to be there all day because of their lack of either experience or stamina or ability to handle all of that input when they've been so used to the staggered teaching or distance learning. It might be more difficult for some students. So we certainly could consider a part-time or transition if they're going back into the hybrid kind of thing where they visit the school several days a week. Let's talk about the most important IEP team member, which is the parent. You know, parents are worried, and at the same time, they want their children to receive free, appropriate public education. You know, parents should not have to do it alone. You know, ask the medical and service providers in the community that work with your child for input on the child's physical or mental health and the impact of some of the educational decisions and maybe the impact of distance learning as well. So as a reminder, you are the parent, not the primary teacher. Distance learning is not a choice that you made in many, many instances. During the time of distance learning, your child still has a teacher. Your job is to help your child have the space and the time that they need to work on the lessons that their teacher has developed. It's also important that families reach out if there is not enough instruction and ask for additional instruction. Ask for that child to work directly with the teacher. Parents may request parent training on the online systems and platforms. And for schools, tracking attendance has been a significant issue. Talk with the IEP team about attendance accommodations to ensure that there is not unreasonable consequences. Nevada Department of Education has developed a guidance for schools and school districts on attendance for Nevada schools. And then as schools transition to hybrid models, parents may have additional questions for the school about attendance. Asking the school for their information of how they are going to track attendance can also be somewhat helpful in avoiding misunderstandings. But families are always welcome to ask and be able to view the Nevada Department of Ed's guidance that references expectations for students in Nevada on attendance. So please contact our office if you need that particular handout. Another reminder that IDEA doesn't set a time limit on IEP meetings. You know, parents can request more time to complete the IEP if that's time is necessary. I'd like to remind everyone that students must have access. They must have suitable access to things that are going to be necessary in order for the child to receive free appropriate public education. So access to the general curriculum and general ed environment, you know, it doesn't really include time such as like passing between classes and lunchtime. Those are not general ed settings in distance learning. And so there is a lot of misunderstanding about that. Children are not passing in the hallways, they're in their home in many instances. Now, there could be some general ed time if the child is moving toward being in a hybrid kind of situation where they are going to school a couple of days a week. So general education teachers and special education teachers are going to need to work together to ensure that communication is occurring and that the overall master schedule doesn't affect the delivery of individualized services to students. You know, Nevada PEP gets many phone calls from families that they're saying, well, my child's supposed to be in this class from 9 to 10, and then he is missing the instruction because he has to leave the class at 9:45. And so we need to minimize and reduce those kinds of disruptions and interruptions. It also calls out a lot of attention to that student. And so we need to find ways to where the general ed and the special education are true collaborators and are able to work out so that the child has access to the general curriculum, but also has the support and help they need to adjust either the pace of instruction or the requirements and assignments. So let's have the conversation about compensatory education. So compensatory education is not really dependent on the length of the closure. It's dependent on the individual needs of the students. So there does need to be an opportunity for review of the information, the data that was collected during the time of the closure, to make sure that the individual determination as to whether or not that they would meet a certain criteria for compensatory education. You know, decisions are going to have to be based on the individual IEP team's determination and looking at the data and whether or not there was a lost skill that would need to be taught. So that Nevada Department of Ed November guidance document gives us a little insight to the department's position is, while this discussion focuses on the remedy of compensatory education, the nature of the remedy is an individualized determination, and the school districts and parents are encouraged to work together to resolve any disagreements. For one student, providing compensatory education before or after school may be appropriate. For another student, the extension of the school day may cause fatigue or information overload and may negatively impact the educational benefit of instruction and services received during the school day. What is clear is that any determined compensatory education must be in addition to the services that are set forth in the student's IEP and cannot interfere with the student's receipt of those services. Given these factors and the need to timely remedy regression and loss of progress, IEP teams are encouraged to consider creative and innovative remedies that take into consideration each student's unique needs and strengths. Another topic that has been a common topic during the pandemic is the ways that we help children adjust to these in-person services. The IEP team may want to discuss how an occupational therapist can consult and provide support to help students with sensory issues and difficulties with keeping socially distant. Asking more questions about the transportation process can also help families feel a little bit more comfortable, since it may look quite a bit different than prior to the pandemic. So getting a clear understanding of expectations, what the student needs to do, how they need to stay in a specific seat, and how they are probably going to enter the bus and maybe exit the bus at a different point when they're going on board and they're leaving. So the IEP team may want to talk about and communicate what's working and what concerns are not resolved. And that's why that communication, even regularly from families, can help a lot in documenting what services were provided and not provided. So if there's technology difficulties, or for example, the class is set up and the teacher is not available, all of that documentation needs to be delivered very regularly to the school. So when we sit down at the IEP table, we have an accumulation of some things that were working and some things that weren't working. As a reminder, the pandemic does not change the rights and protections under IDEA. Students with disabilities' access to FAPE should not be diminished, compromised, or waived. We need schools to be flexible and understand that family circumstances may not allow for parents to provide instruction, like right there all day. Working parents, single parents, parents with multiple children, it is absolutely impossible. If, for example, a family has 5 children, and to sit with each one of them, there's no way that mom or dad could do that, and certainly still provide food for those children as well. So that's where we need that creative and that collaborative spirit, as well as the flexibility. So if distance learning is not effective, schools are going to have to think of a way that students can receive those services so they don't incur a loss of credit or even promotion or graduation. Parents may want to ask how communication is going to take place in the event of a teacher absence or delay in starting online classes. Other emergency disruptions, such as internet disruptions on either the student or the teacher side, will need a communication method. Let's talk a moment about resolving disagreements. So we encourage families to organize your concerns and keep documentation. We've talked to families about keeping a journal or keeping a calendar that describes what kinds of difficulties occurred in, say, the month of January or February. It's important to meet with the school and district staff to share your concerns. You want to brainstorm, you want to listen, you want to focus on the issues. How can we resolve that? And acknowledge some progress that's made toward any agreements that you're working on. And of course, encouraging that regular parent-teacher communication. Once again, I'm going to stop for a moment and encourage you to type in questions got that question pane open. Also, encourage you to download those handouts. They're going to be very helpful. Let's talk about some of the types of disagreements and resolution or dispute resolution processes that are out there. So under IDEA, the Nevada Department of Ed is responsible for the administration of dispute resolution processes such as due process, mediation, and state complaints. Procedural safeguards protect the rights of parents to help plan their child's educational program. Schools must give parents a copy of their IDEA rights. These rights also provide steps for parents and schools to try to resolve disagreements. IEP facilitation is a process where a non-biased facilitator helps with the communication at the meeting to develop a meaningful IEP that is supported by team members. Sometimes this process is necessary if parents are sharing the fact that they don't feel like their voice is being heard, that maybe they've been told they can't speak, or maybe there's an agenda that's restricted their opportunity to participate. All of those types of things, an IEP facilitator can help the group remember how important it is to hear everyone's voice. Mediation is an opportunity between the parents and the school district. As a reminder, mediation is voluntary, and they must agree, both the school district and the parents have to try it. And there's a person who is a trained mediator who does not work for the school district. They help both sides to reach a written agreement. So the issues get identified, we work through each issue and try to come to some consensus, and then able to write up an agreement. The resolution session, that is a meeting that would occur after a parent or the school district had actually filed a due process complaint. When the parent submits that due process complaint, then within 15 days, the school would be able to call and schedule that resolution session so that families could have that discussion with the school about their concerns and what brought them to the point to where they felt they needed to file this due process complaint. If the resolution meeting results in an agreement that we're going to drop the due process complaint because we are going to, changes in the list of areas here, then the due process complaint process stops and the hearing officer backs off. And the agreement is what families would use to be able to start finding ways to incorporate it into an IEP. So the agreement would go back to the IEP table and be incorporated into that child's IEP so that changes could be made and that services could be improved for the student. So that impartial due process hearing, again, is any allegation that FAPE is not being provided, or parents disagree with placement or eligibility or other types of services. It could also have a discussion about the amount of services, the frequency and duration of services. So it also could feel as though that the child's not making meaningful progress. As we talked about earlier with Andrew F., was a due process complaint that started and went all the way to the Supreme Court. Most due process complaints in Nevada do get resolved in resolution sessions. However, some still do go to hearing. and that will require the family to have hired an attorney because that process conducts itself in a more formalized manner, requiring evidence and calling of witnesses and cross-examination and all of those and types of processes that we see in very formalized hearings. State complaint is a written letter that is part of has to be formatted in a certain way. The Nevada Department of Ed and Nevada PEP have the sample state complaint letters so that families meet all the requirements, but it is a process to use when parents believe that the IEP under IDEA or under the Nevada Administrative Code is not being followed. So it's a written complaint which parents explain what the concern is, provide information about the concern, and even suggest some solutions to the concern. So if services were not provided, related services or any services, the state complaint process is a mechanism for families to request that the services be made up and that services be provided as quickly as possible. And then constituent concern investigation is outside of the IDEA process. That is a Nevada process, but it is a way for anyone in the community or a parent to write a concern and ask for the Nevada Department of Ed to investigate. And if they find that there are findings, then they will ask the school district to develop a corrective action plan. One of the concerns sometimes to families in that constituent concern investigation process is that they don't actually get a written response back from the Nevada Department of Ed. So sometimes the way they see change being made is if the school has them come back into an IEP meeting where they have additional conversations about the concern, which in most instances the school has some idea what the concern is, but they are then seeing probably the effect of some change. But the constituent concern investigation does allow for systemic change as well as individual child remedy as well. So it could be a situation where parents are even asking for compensatory or additional services because they believe that the school is violating a portion or part of IDEA or other Nevada regulation. So as you can see, there is numerous ways that families can resolve disagreements. There are some conversations that need to take place regarding concerns that maybe don't fall under special education or are not related to the implementation of an IEP or a Section 504 plan. You know, some issues such as grades, attendance, teacher interactions, misunderstandings, wrong information about assignment submittal, and discussion about retention are all ways that families may even contact Nevada PEP or have concerns that their children are not getting appropriate education. So first, we encourage families to talk with the teacher. I mean, find out right there at the teacher level what's going on and what the concern and how we can try to resolve it. If that does not feel as though it's productive or the teacher is not responding, you know, talk with the assistant principal or the principal. Of course, we want to use problem-solving process to resolve the issue. Be clear about what the concerns are and how we can work together to, you know, be able to clear up any kind of misunderstanding or to express concerns that education is just not working for their child and their family. You also can use the public concern process. Out of all of our districts, in Nevada, they do have a public concern process. And this could be something where you didn't like something on the school property, or you wanted to express some concern that a staff member didn't handle things well, and you want to share that with the administration. You want to write down the concern and what would it take to resolve the issue. So it's always important that there is an ask in there. So sharing what the problem is, and then what you believe the remedy to that problem is, whether it be more training for staff, or perhaps it is a situation where you believe that the school needs to work with an individual to be able to report it out to families more effectively. You want to find out who the associate or maybe assistant superintendent, and in these smaller districts, it would, maybe just a superintendent is for the district. The size of the district can make a big difference on who's over the principal. Find out who that next level or layer is. Of course, other options could be that you speak with a trustee that serves their area. Parents could also make public comments in school board meetings. Parents could use that back to that constituent concern investigation process for system-wide complaints. If they feel like that there is practices going on at the school that are just very inappropriate, and they want to shine some light on them. An example, it might be that children that were asked to stay in a room, a locked room, or there were some ways of applying discipline that were very inappropriate. Any of those kinds of things, immediately you want to report, but you don't have to wait for these constituent concerns to be processed. But anything regarding safety needs to go right to the principal, and he is the site manager, and he's the one, or she's the one, to respond to concerns regarding children's safety and health and welfare. Okay, as we wrap up, I wanted to remind you again that question pane is open, and happy to take questions. And we certainly want to encourage you to download those handouts. And we want to thank you for being part of our webinar today. Please visit our website, which is the nvpep.org. Also, our email, the pepinfo@nvpep.org. See that on our screen. And of course, there's our 800 number. Nevada PEP is committed to helping families, and certainly we have found that families have really been stressed and have been put through a lot in the last year, trying to meet all of their obligations and take care of their families. And we're very concerned about that. And we want to encourage parents that may be feeling isolated or alone to consider coming to one of our Wednesday support groups. They're at 3:00 p.m. We have them in English and Spanish. You want to visit our website and sign up so that you are able to get that link and join in. But listening to other families, sharing your concerns, getting questions answered, those support groups are a great way for families to interact who often maybe are feeling this, that they don't have a lot of adults to talk to. So we would really want to encourage you, if you need help, if you have questions, if you want to talk to one of our staff, don't hesitate to call. We're available, we're ready and waiting for your call. So please consider making that call if you would like to just ask some questions, or if you would like the help and support of a Nevada Pet Advocate. As a reminder, all of our services are free. There are no charge for our services. And we are serving families that have children ages 0 to 26. So we're here for the long haul, and we really want to be there to support a family that has questions or concerns or really is stressed over some of the changes. One of the things that we found very much so is that families that have been in distance learning, they want to stay in distance learning, and they have that right. And so we're all about options. So families need to pick the option that works best for them, and they should be able to make that choice and feel comfortable in their decision. So whatever families want to do, we're here to support their decisions and help them as they make any kind of change at all. So I want to thank you again for being part of our webinar. I do see one question in here, so we'll stop for a second here. And just a comment. Thank you. I appreciate your kind comment. I'm glad that this information was helpful today and that we kind of focus on some of the things that we've seen in the last year that have been a strong concern for the families that we serve. Thank you again. Please, we wish you great health and that you stay well and safe, and consider giving our office a call if there's anything we can do to help. Thank you again, and have a great day.